I don't know whether to go off of that clock.
Yeah,
There we
I'd
go.
go off of that.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock a.m. and ask that as a courtesy to everybody ensure that they have silenced their cell phones, and remind at the same time our directors to turn their microphones on each time that they speak to help with audio and video recordings. For the record, I'll note that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law, and the notice of this board meeting was provided to each of the directors. At this time, I would like to ask Director Rick Huber to deliver the invocation.
Pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful, Lord, for all the blessings that you bestowed on us. Thank you for this beautiful day, and we thank you for this holy week where we're going to sacrifice what the Lord Jesus Christ did for us. We thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of Texas on this committee and this board, and we ask you to give us discernment and good judgment and wisdom as we deliberate business today. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Notification was received from Directors Abraham, Flores, Lattimore, and Smith that they stated that they would not be present for this meeting. And at this time, we have reached the portion of the meeting where we have set aside time to hear from the general public. Those interested in providing comments by filling out one of the cards available at the reception desk would be called to approach the podium to make their comments at this time, but I believe there are none.
There are none.
Seeing that no one wishes to speak, we will move forward on the agenda. The first agenda item is discussion and possible action on fiscal year 2025 annual comprehensive financial report by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning. Thank you, Director Lloyd. Good morning, Board. This first item is to bring our fiscal year 2025 annual comprehensive financial report to you for review. We presented it to our Admin and Audit Committee earlier. At the end of this, you will be given a resolution to approve. I want to start by talking a little bit about what the annual comprehensive financial report is. The purpose is to provide our board of directors, our customers, our stakeholders, and any other interested parties with reliable financial information about the BRA that's in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. The ACFR, as we call it, is a historical document. It presents the actual results for the prior fiscal year, as opposed to our annual operating plan or our budget, which is a prospective document, which is the financial plan for the upcoming fiscal year. The budget and the ACFR differ from each other in several ways. In the budget, we do not recognize depreciation. We also, in the ACFR, debt service principal and payments and capital asset purchases are classified as expenses in the budget, but they are adjusted on the balance sheet in the ACFR. Our ACFR is divided into three major sections. There's the introductory section, which includes general information about the Brazos River Authority. There is a transmittal letter from the general manager, which talks about the financial highlights from the year. And there is the GFOA Award, which is our Government Finance Officers Association Award. We submit our ACFR every year to this organization. They review it and make sure it meets their guidelines. When we submit the 2025, this will be our 40th consecutive for that award. Then there's the financial section. There's our independent auditor's report. There is required supplemental information, which includes our management discussion and analysis. There's a set of basic financial statements, and then there are notes to the supplemental information. And then the third section is the statistical section, which is unaudited. But we provide information there that we hope will help the user interpret and understand better what they're seeing in our financial statements. Included in there, we have some 10-year comparative data. We have information about all of our debt issues. We talk about our major customers, the demographics of our customer base, and our schedule of insurance. Okay. I'm going to turn this over now to Aaron Worthman. He is the partner in charge with Baker Tilly, who is our independent audit firm.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Aaron Worthman. I'm the lead audit principal for this year's audit, and I'm pleased to present the fiscal year 2025 financial audit. What I want to do first is I just want to go through an audit overview. What exactly is it that we do as part of our audit? Then want to go through you charged with governance, our auditor communication, and then open up to any questions anyone may have. So to give you some perspective on the audit, our firm spends about 400 hours going about and conducting our audit of your annual comprehensive financial report. I'd say this year's audit went very well. If you think back a couple years ago, we had significant accounting changes relative to leases, subscription-based information technology arrangements. Well, this year, the only policy change we had was specific to compensated absences. And that change wasn't material, so we did not have to go back to the prior year and restate those. So again, very straightforward audit. As always, management and staff were cooperative, readily available to answer our questions. We do perform about 3 weeks of field work. We do 1 preliminary field work and then 2 weeks of final field work, with our last day of final field work being November 8th. To give you some perspective into the audit process, about 30% of what we do is specific to internal controls and testing of those internal controls, most of which is going to center in the information technology areas, so much so, in fact, that we have a certified information systems auditor that goes about and conducts that testing. But that's about 30%. 40% of what we do then is what we call our substantive tests. That would be, taking a look at your cash and investments, confirming those with outside parties. Taking a look at your fixed asset additions and retirements, tracing some of those retirements to your continuing property records. And then the remaining 30% has to do with financial reporting, taking a look at your annual comprehensive financial report and the planning of our audit. But what I've done here is I've outlined our major areas of emphasis. And if you I think if you take a look at this, none of these should really come as any surprise. Cash and investments, we spend some significant time. Disbursements, payroll, revenue recognition specific to utility revenue and billing, your financial report again. Fixed assets, long-term debt, and then taking a look analytically at the increases and decreases in your revenues and expenditures. So our audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Those are the standards that we're required to follow as your audit firm. In addition to that, we also audit you in compliance with government auditing standards. Those are additional standards relative to my team's continuing professional education, the supervision of my audit team, quality control, due care, and our independence. Our audit objective is to obtain reasonable assurance that your financial statements are free from material misstatement. At the end of this year's audit, your financial statements have received an unmodified opinion, which is also known as a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your audit firm. Now, I'd mentioned we provided an opinion on your financial statements, and I talked a little bit about internal controls. I do want to note we do not provide an opinion on internal controls. However, if we identify control breakdowns or deficiencies, we need to categorize those in area of severity. The most severe would be a material weakness. And the definition of that is any breakdown of controls or lack of controls that would lead to more than a reasonable possibility that your financial statements could be materially misstated. And we did not identify any material weaknesses. The next categorization down, less severe than a material weakness, is what we call significant deficiency. Well, that's a breakdown that would warrant your attention as governance. And we did not identify any significant deficiencies. Now, I will say, as part of any audit, we oftentimes have minor control deficiencies industry best practice recommendations, things like that. If we do, I'd say most of the time those revolve around information technology. But again, nothing that would rise to the level of material or significant. So you've also received an auditor insight letter. Part of that letter outlines our required communications. Just want to touch on a couple here. One is auditor independence. I am here to state that our firm and every individual on your audit is independent to your organization in fact and appearance. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions during this year's audit. Michelle had gone through the ACFR. One of the areas within that ACFR is your significant accounting policies. If you haven't, I urge you to take a look at those. An example of which would be your capitalization policy. So what we need to do as auditors is we need to look at those policies, make sure they comply with generally accepted accounting principles, but not only that they apply, but that you're actually following those. So we'll test that accordingly. Now, we often get questions when you take a look at these statements, what are the limitations or what areas should you pay particular attention to? And I'll state it's almost anything that has to do with an estimate. So much so, in fact, we're required to point out what significant estimates are within your financial statements. And your entity has three. One being, I talked about earlier, your accrued compensated absences liability. The big one would be your net pension asset and liability. And then lastly, the depreciation of your fixed assets. This year, we did not have any adjusting journal entries, and we did not have any waived adjusting journal entries. And in addition to that, we did not have any significant audit findings, compliance issues, or concerns. Just note, if at any time during the year or during the audit we did identify a significant issue, fraud, something like that, this wouldn't be the first time you'd be hearing about it. I would certainly reach out to you and have those discussions on a timely basis. So lastly, we would just like to thank Michelle and Susan for all their work. These results, a nice, I'd say, boring result, clean opinion, all of these things, no findings, that just doesn't happen. That's due to all the work of your team here. In addition to that, they work great with us. They answer our questions timely. So we definitely appreciate all their work. I'd mentioned we spent about 400 hours. That team may not spend 400 hours, but I bet if you asked them, it's probably closing in on that, putting the ACFR together and all those other items. So again, thank you. And with that, open it up to any questions anyone might have.
No
Okay.
questions?
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Travel safe.
All right, if there's no questions, before I read the resolution, though, I would like to call out Susan Alamon. She's our controller. She is the heartbeat of that audit, and she came in. This is the first audit she's done for BRA on her own. She came in behind an employee who had been handling that for us for over 20 years, and so she came in without missing a beat. Susan, I can't thank her enough. The ACFR will be posted on our website. We will email to your email of record. If anyone would like a hard copy, Susan has hard copies there with her. So, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby accepts the Brazos River Authority's annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended August 31st, 2025, and approves its filing with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and be it further resolved that the Chief Financial Officer is hereby designated to file the report and the annual filing of the affidavit with the Executive Director of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
You heard a reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion by Director Taylor, seconded by Director Huber. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Louise,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yep.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
We're going to go out of order here. We're going to move agenda item 8 up right now, which is executive session. The Board of Directors will conduct a closed meeting in executive session on the following matters: to consult with attorney regarding pending or contemplated litigation with respect to the Lake Whitney reallocation project pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.071 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified as Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. If you are not specifically involved in the presentation of the first executive session agenda item that I just described, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session agenda item, time will be allowed to clear the boardroom and call the next presenters. We ask that the public please wait in the break room in order to keep the hallways clear until the executive session is finished. Sorry. The Board of Directors hereby reconvenes into open session at 11:01 a.m. And do you have a resolution?
Okay, there we go. I think we've got it there now. Whereas the Whitney reallocation project is facing ongoing challenges from third parties, whereas in July 2025, the Board of Directors authorized $500,000 for the legal services of Jones and Fortuna LP to support the Brazos River Authority through the Whitney reallocation project. Whereas Brazos River Authority staff believe the continuation of legal services as well as the possible retention of additional hydropower, legislative, and economic experts may be necessary to adequately resolve these ongoing challenges. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager/CEO to expend an additional $300,000 for the services of any type of experts deemed necessary to facilitate the negotiation of any third-party challenges and achieve final authorization on the Lake Whitney reallocation project by the United States Army Corps of Engineers.
You heard a reading of the resolution. Motion to adopt made by Director Huber, second by Director Henderson. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yep.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we're gonna jump to item 12, the Allens Creek project. On the agenda is item number 12, Discussion and possible action, Allen's Creek Reservoir Project Contract by Rachel Lane, Program Manager.
Hey, good morning. I am not Rachel Lane, as you all know, but we've got a few intro slides we want to go through before we get going, and David had a few words to kick us off here.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So we started looking at, we wanted to make sure we are articulating our goal for the Allens Creek project, and we want to advance this project with speed, efficiency, and also ensuring that we're being accountable as we go through. Ultimately delivering a project that's going to help meet the long-term water supply needs of our basin, help support and strengthen managing risk and cost as we go. So as we go through this project over time, you'll hear us talk more about each of these key priorities, be it regulatory certainty, making sure we're on top of our cost stewardship. Today you'll hear about our plan of how we're going to look to the future and plan the work and make sure that we're engaging with the board as well as other stakeholders appropriately. There's a lot of risk in projects like these. There's a lot of unknowns. And for where we're at in the project, there should be unknowns. We don't know everything yet, but we're systematically working through it to get those unknowns identified because we have to factor those into all the major decisions that are coming. You also see on the list stakeholder alignment. We want to accelerate where we can. If there are opportunities for us to move faster, we want to identify those and proactively work to incorporate those into our own schedule. We want to be efficient. We want to reduce rework as much as possible and make sure we have a long-term strategic lens that we're looking at this project and how we deliver it. And finally, to go back to what we hinged on before, it's about developing a project that is of the size that will allow us to bring forth supply sufficiency. We want to make sure the project is big enough. We could go really fast on a really small project, but they may not help our overall goal of adding additional supply storage. So before Rachel goes up, I've just got a few things. These were a little bit of a byproduct of the committee meeting. And first on this graph, what I wanted to illustrate was these are examples from the 2026 Regional Water Plan. All of these projects likely won't be built, but they're all costed the same. There's a formal process through the regional water planning process where they determine the cost of different projects. And although these aren't apples to apples in many cases, what's important to remember is if we didn't proceed with Allens Creek, we would likely be looking at a different type of project, one where we may not own the property already. We may not have a water right. It may require more conveyance of the water. So this just gives kind of a landscape, and what you'll see starting on the left side of the screen, those projects, this is a unit cost per acre foot during debt repayment. So over $1,800 an acre foot on the far left for an off-channel reservoir, all the way down to our project in blue here on the far right, which is Allens Creek. Now you might ask why there's two on there, and the reason is because in the regional water plan, they have the total project capital cost somewhere around $500 million. We think that may or may not be right, so we wanted to do a little sensitivity analysis, so we doubled it. We put it at 558, puts it almost at $1 billion in capital cost. It's still a very attractive project in comparison to these other projects. All of these are, I don't know if I said it, but they are surface water projects, so large reservoir projects included in the plan. On the next slide, we want to take the comparison just a little bit further and incorporate yield, because to go back to supply sufficiency again, we're going to need a lot of water to help the situation. So we start in these quadrants. In the bottom left corner, you have your low cost but low yield projects. In the top left are the low yield, higher cost. In the top right, you have the high cost, high yield. And in the bottom right, which is where both scenarios of Allens Creek land, these are the relatively lower cost per unit cost and develop a high yield out near 100,000 acre feet. So again, it stacks up very attractively against other similar type projects. Finally, we wanted to illustrate what does Allens Creek actually, what does the impact to our system rate look like? So what we've got here is a 10-year projection. This is the same projection that was shown in our customer meeting last year, and it goes out to 2035. And if you'll note at the top of 2035, you've got a little orange sliver. That's the impact of Allens Creek in 2035 when we first start paying back some of that debt. And that's less than $2 an acre foot. Through the Water Development Board funding, we're able to defer some of our payments out for a period of time. So that allows us to push that out and get it out here to when other things within our organization happen, when more units might be available to sell. It helps defray some of that cost. Were there any questions on any of those? Because the next slide will bring Rachel up to go through the progress and talk about our plans forward, but wanted to give an opportunity. Okay. Well, with that, we'll have Rachel come up and walk you through the progress and kind of what the future looks like.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Lane. I'm the program manager for Allens Creek Project. This morning, we are going through the project status, execution plan, contracting strategy, and then we have a resolution. The Allens Creek Reservoir Committee met earlier this month and gave excellent input, which I have incorporated into today's presentation. So if you were here 2 weeks ago, then you'll see a few different slides. But also, I wanted to briefly review the project status and describe our execution plan for the entire board. And we will also, like I mentioned, be going through the contracting strategy that we have for this project. It is a long duration project. We have a lot to cover, so I'll pause between agenda items to address questions. So beginning with the project status, the work authorized by the Board of Directors in March 2025 was to investigate the fixed conditions of the site, property survey and utilities, river stability at the meander, which is where one of the proposed pump station locations is, preliminary cultural and environmental studies, and these efforts have centered on developing the technical analysis that's going to be required for the next phase of the project, which is alternative analysis. We also were able to scope our field investigations for the coming 17 months. And we are preparing defensible data that's necessary to determine the project's permitting strategy. In this past year, we have compiled known information and easy to obtain information on the project site. And today I'll go into those briefly and describe where each one puts us today. I want to point out that the project site is 9,500 acres, which is approximately the size of the George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston. And it doesn't have any roads or infrastructure at this point. It's in South Texas, so it gets very wet, and maneuvering on the site is difficult at times. We built that into our schedule. Everything is on schedule, which is nice. We built weather delays in as well, and we did experience those quite a bit with lightning. About 18% of field days were impacted by lightning. But we're looking ahead long-term and making long-term improvements to the site to make all future field work more accessible and easier to reduce project schedule interruptions. So for the project status, our final reports have been filed for several tasks, the majority of the tasks really, and are underway for the final remainder of the tasks. Key metrics such as schedule, scope, financials, and safety, those were all on track. Upcoming permitting prerequisites have been noted throughout the process, and our project team was able to identify savings during this early work phase of over $500,000 actually for one aspect of the project, and then we deferred some work that we found was not necessary, which provided savings for about $300,000. And what that allowed us to do is to accelerate one of the environmental studies that will be required on the project. And I think that speaks to the experience of our team. We are working with Gannett Fleming. I'll go into detail on that later. They're our prime consultant with HDR as a partner. And so HDR is performing a study out there that we were able to accelerate the detailed work for the next phase of the project. And so our execution plan is based on strategic decision-making such as that. During the next phase, we will be going into alternatives analysis, and what that is determining the appropriate design to meet the regulatory requirements and to meet our need for the reservoir. And we incorporate a feedback loop from those detailed studies and the design that's in process during that alternatives analysis, and that gives us our permitting requirements. Quality information that we gather at this stage, that determines our schedule, it determines our efficiency through the permitting stage, and it reduces uncertainty on the schedule. One of the areas that needed evaluation was at this meander cutoff, and the Brazos River on this top map, you can see the Brazos River making a sharp or a very deep meander, and we are evaluating the stability of that meander and whether or not it will cut off. We are still in the final reporting stage for this study, but what we have identified is the need for bank stabilization in this area. We were able to determine that likely the northern pump station, which is much closer to the project site, is a viable option. And so, like I mentioned, we deferred some of the detailed studies on the southern location at this time. And we'll be considering the cost of bank stabilization, further studies, assessing another location during the next phase of our alternatives analysis. Our cultural resource survey also looked at the extent of cultural resource sites. These are based on the results of background research, of published documents, and the proximity of known historic sites. We did find that there's a high potential for cultural resources in and around the project area. If you see on the map, the areas that are using a purple hatch, those are areas of higher probability for encountering cultural resource sites. So along the western edge, we have some that have already been documented back in the 1970s. And then the part that cuts across the red area, that's the project site, those are the site, or that's Allen's Creek. Really, it's an offset of Allen's Creek. And then you see on the eastern side, that's an offset of the Brazos River. There's a higher likelihood for there to be sites near water bodies. So that kind of directs our next phase of studies into more targeted locations. The good news to me is that the highest probability areas for the sites are on the extremities of the project. And what that allows us to do is strategically design a project that impacts less sites. And that's one of our strategies for the project, is to evaluate the need for impacting sites, because if we impact them, we will have to mitigate for them. That can be both costly for time and schedule, and also monetary costs. I want to point out that as we move into the next phase for the detailed studies, this project for this our Texas Antiquities permit and the archaeological survey will be the largest in Texas likely this year. And so it is a large field effort, but we have a good direction at this point and know how to move forward strategically. Wetland delineation means defining the regulated waters and wetlands within the project area. So this year we developed a proposed wetland delineation approach through desktop and a small field reconnaissance review. And we found that the study area contains the Brazos River, being a navigable river. Obviously, it is waters of the United States. Also, Allen's Creek is relatively permanent water. So it is also likely waters of the United States. And then also various tributaries. There's some constructed irrigation ditches. Those will need to be evaluated further. And our studies will be based on our impacts to those. Agency coordination is built into our plan, especially on this element, because we are looking at, in the next 12 months, pursuing concurrence on our proposed wetland delineation approach. Our proposed approach will optimize the level of effort to complete a full field delineation of the entire project area. So we may be able to strategically approach that. Evaluated impacts to potential impacts to protected species, which will require permitting and mitigation, is another element that we looked at. We researched the public records in this 5-mile buffer area that's shown. So again, the red area is our project site, and then the black dotted line is that 5-mile buffer area. You can see that we did identify some protected species. They're mostly along the Brazos River channel. They're shown in the yellow with the blue, and some of them are shown with blue dots. And then there's this big purple dot that's on the northern end. And what that is a past identified occurrence of a Houston toad in the northern part of Austin County. And so that one occurrence drives the need for us to do the habitat study that I was mentioning earlier. Our team accelerated that study, which is a good thing, because it is a 3-year requirement, and it also is constrained by schedule. So the breeding timeframe for the Houston toad is from February to June, and the studies have to be accomplished during that period. So when we identified that we were going to have that cost savings in the early work, we accelerated that and got monitors in place this year by January and have had them working. So we believe that that will be a viable study. We just need some rain down there. There's only been one 1-inch rain event since getting them out there. So rain events all during the summer when we're trying to do field work, and then nothing when we need the rain for the study. But I feel like this spring we'll be able to complete that study. And we haven't identified any toads at this point. And it's also important to note that really so far the only biological impacts we have will be for the pump station location, which is along the river. So we'll be able to design that in a way to limit those impacts. The biological surveys also for this project will be the largest on scale. They'll be the largest in the state this year. So another huge field effort. And then finally, the geotechnical study, we went ahead and completed the first phase investigation as a baseline study. This was a large effort. You can see the location of geotechnical borings shown on the map, and that includes, most of them include multiple depth holes, and it also includes 11 monitor wells, which will be long-term monitoring for the whole project duration. Future investigations will continue in fiscal year 28, and the second phase will include a geophysics survey and additional core borings in targeted locations. And those will be pursuant to our preferred design alternative. So that's why we have scheduled it that way, so that we can spend that money wisely and get the information from exactly where we need it. And we will know at that point. I want to pause here and see if there are any questions on the early work, and then I'll move into what we're going to be doing next. Yes, sir.
Looking at the meander, is what you were talking about, we're studying the cost to stabilize that so that it will not break through, as opposed to the cost of the alternative pumping station expense, is that right?
Yes. So beginning later this year, we start workshops to look at the different design alternatives, and we do not have a design at this point. We hardly have a footprint. We know the project site because we have all that land consolidated, but we'll be weighing in the alternatives analysis, which is what I'm about to explain in more detail. We will be weighing the cost. Sometimes it's not monetary cost. Sometimes it's the cost of permitting time. Sometimes it's the cost of resource impacts. Sometimes it's the real monetary cost of mitigating those resource impacts. We'll be comparing that with a design. We need a design that meets the need. We need a design that will hold enough water and provide that supply sufficiency that John mentioned earlier. And so we are going to be comparing all of those. And the way that we do that is we build a matrix of different elements, design and impacts and mitigation, and we build it out into this huge matrix for decision-making process. That's something that the Corps will use when they evaluate our analysis of which is the preferred alternative. So I'll move into the execution plan. So all of those technical evaluations will feed into that decision-making process. Our goal as we move into this execution plan is to manage risk by being well-informed early and having sufficient good quality information. So the project decision framework includes components that serve as our foundation in place. So these are fixed elements that may be constrained by regulatory or engineering requirements. And then other elements still remain flexible or they're dependent on the result of the site studies. And at this point, we are actively managing risk through strategic quality information gathering. The alternatives analysis, like I just mentioned, will weigh each of these elements against each other. We'll look at other ways that we could source the needed amount of water. We'll look at design options for what the reservoir will look like, where the embankment location will be. Pump station configurations are part of that, other infrastructure siting, and these directly impact our permitting complexity. So the more of those triggers that we trip, the more difficult our permitting, or at least the more complex our permitting will be. Where we can, we will take an approach for avoidance or minimizing impacts to protected resources and limiting the cost of mitigating those. And then as we move through that decision-making framework, we move into a point where our alternatives analysis has ensured that subsequent project decisions are supported by thorough and reliable information. So we will accurately estimate the impacts to resources and prepare a mitigation plan. We're prioritizing these critical tasks now because we need to do that in order to ensure that we have a defensible evaluation of alternatives to give to the Corps of Engineers when they review our permit application. The permitting path will be determined by defensible analysis, and it needs to be defensible for us to the Corps, and then for the Corps to defend that if they concur with our preferred alternative. We are advancing these decisions in the order that reduces risk rather than in the order that just advances design. So like I mentioned, there's a feedback loop, and I'm going to look into that or describe that a little bit more for you here. So we have...
As you
Yes.
discuss this, talk about the concurrent nature of how things are overlapping and
Yes.
we're not doing one, stopping doing another, please.
Absolutely. Within the Gannett Fleming team and BRA team, we have extensive experience on projects like this. I think we added up like 134 years of experience within the team that is sitting in this room right now. So we have found that this is the best approach, the most streamlined approach to moving forward through the permitting and getting us to construction. This is an approach that is somewhat phased, but I broke it out here to simplify it. But like Mr. Collingsworth said, it is not necessarily one after another. So to point out one of those, right now we're at where the yellow star is. So we've gathered some information, quite a bit of information from the site. We do have our property position in place, but we're moving into the alternatives analysis, and there will be a feedback loop where we need to get more information from the site, and then that will inform the alternatives that we're looking at. And again, alternatives are just different designs. And we will be looking for complete and high quality data collection as we move through the data gathering stage. And we'll be doing a thorough alternatives evaluation. So, and this means looking at all the various alternatives, anything that could foreseeably, we could have no reservoir, and where do we get the water from? We could have a reservoir in another location in the basin, and is that less environmentally impacting than our proposed site at Allen's Creek? And so some of those we'll throw out really quickly, but we'll document all of them in order to provide that information to the Corps of Engineers. This phasing does reduce the risk of costly rework. So where we want that feedback loop to be is in the stage we're in now. If we submit a permit application and it is incomplete and the Corps sends us back for more data gathering, then everyone's already demobilized. We are almost starting over. So we're avoiding that costly rework by doing a quality job right now. Ultimately, this will get us through the permit application phase. Design does begin during that phase, and it will begin strategically at a point where we are starting to see that our preferred alternative is going to be accepted. It's somewhere in the middle of the permitting phase. We'll begin working on that final design, and I have a slide here in a minute because we did have some discussion about this during the committee meeting, and I have a slide to explain kind of how the timing works a little bit better. And then we move to the construction phase once design is complete. Like I said, these initial phases drive the overall schedule. Another element of this is alignment with our regulatory agencies. So I highlighted on this, there are pre-application meetings occurring with regulatory agencies now. There are formal coordination that will occur during the later permitting stages. And what we're looking for is alignment with the agencies so that what we're proposing is something that they'll accept, or at least that they understand our methodology. And we do want to phase those once we have enough information to make commitments and to have those conversations, not too early and definitely not too late. So we are very, very diligent about doing those meetings at the right time and including everyone who needs to be included, because eventually when the Corps puts our permit out for comment, all of these public agencies will be able to comment on it, and we don't want to have surprises. We want to include their concerns early on. So this is the slide that I mentioned that goes through the projected timing for these major tasks. So this is based off of a realistic, what we've based our planning on is shown in the colored bars. So that is just a realistic timeline to give us something to go off of. It's based off of a level of certainty and risk decisions. It can be flexible in that area. It also is based off of today's current regulatory environment, which is ever changing. So what we are building into this plan, into the whole program, is flexibility to adjust as we have opportunities. We will accelerate where we can, and you can see there are numbers, there are years given above. This is not best and worst case scenario. This is a reasonably good project, could take between 5 and 12 and a half years for permitting. The design we feel like is that's pretty much as accelerated as you can go for the pump station. So the 2.5 years to 3 years, the design is pretty easy to scope at this point. The reason that we don't have as narrow of a known time frame for the permitting is because we still haven't finished all of our studies that show us what we're going to encounter out there. So in the next 18 months, we will have much higher percentage certainty for what we're going to impact, and we'll know exactly what our permitting path is. And then really, it's just like I said, the next step is just aligning with the agencies. Construction could be 4 to 7 years, and the reason that we have a range there so wide is because right now we don't know the design. So we don't know what we're constructing, but we're just using 5 years as an estimate because we need to have an order of magnitude at this point. We need to focus our efficiency efforts there in the early phase. Good quality information right now, gathering that right now, will accelerate the project. So that drives the schedule. If we don't gather the right information, if we don't gather enough information, like I said, it's going to cause rework, which is going to slow down the schedule. And then also there are some areas that that could be trigger points for permitting, like embankment configuration. That's one of the things that we will initially be looking at in our early workshops. What does the embankment look like? We know what it looks like in a way, and it's really, what does it dam up? How far does it go down? Does it dam up Allen's Creek? And if so, like I said, that's waters of the U.S. So we've got a whole nother element of permitting along Allen's Creek. Also, we have mitigation planning, compensatory mitigation planning that we'll have to do, which is almost another permitting effort. It's another big effort in planning and design. The pump station location and what it takes to get it in a location that is permanent and that is that will last us the entire duration of the project, forevermore. That is another thing that we have to look at and could cause us additional permitting. The pipelines, there are a couple of pipelines across the project, and they will need to be relocated. So they add complexity to the project. The mitigation needs are determined by that early work, but we will identify those in the coming months, very short term, in very short order. And then we also have the ability to take advantage of regulatory opportunities, regulatory reforms that are coming out, things like that. Any of that we can apply to the project schedule, we absolutely will. This is where I wanted to mention that once there's confidence in the permitting acceptance, that's where we want to move ahead with this final design. So it may overlap. I didn't show it that way for simplicity's sake, but that may overlap into some of those permitting years. So these may not be 7.5 plus 2.5 plus 5, but there will be some overlap as soon as we are able to do that. And then the sequence is between final design and construction is also, that's where that mitigation element can come in. And if we have a big mitigation requirement, then it could push that 2.5 to 3 years because of the design. So this sequence is also based on BRA-led risk evaluation. We want to eliminate as many variables before we get to the design phase as we can, so that we gain certainty that our design is the best alternative and that the Corps will concur with us on it. So the risks are, we have it in the schedule for the risks to be identified in the workshops in the first months. We're even planning on, assuming that everything moves ahead, that we're planning on in the next month. So we'll be identifying those right off the bat. And then the best case is that around 10 years, we will make it to that construction. And then we'll have a realistic schedule projection in the next 18 months, very realistic schedule projection in the next 18 months. Again, that 18 months means we have all the known information on the site. That's the most important key to this whole thing.
Go back a slide.
Yes, sir.
One more. So the point I want to emphasize here is that to submit a permit, you have to be so far down the road in design, okay? So the way this simplistically shows is that we're going to do all the alternative analysis and then we'll do the permitting, and that's not correct. We already started taking core samples of the soil. That provides data for permitting. So in essence, we've already started the preliminary permitting of the location. And I think it's fair to say that when we submit our permit application, we have to have somewhere around 30% or less, but we have to have enough design of what we're going to build and how it's going to operate and what those impacts are going to be to all that, that the Corps can go and evaluate the impacts that we're potentially causing because of our engineering and design. So we're not spending money doing things, data gathering and the alternatives analysis without working on permit. If I could show you, I believe it's a Gantt chart, you'd see that all these things are working down the road at the same time. It's just harder to show that here. So Rachel talked about risk mitigation and what's coming in the future. And we had we've got a committee, Allen's Creek Committee, and Director Weldon is the chairman, and I'll ask him when we get done with our presentation to give you some thoughts and comments about the meeting that we had. But where I see that committee going in the near future is becoming a body where this BRA team brings to you those decision points. And I don't mean about the compaction of the soil or the type of screws that we're using or the pump size, but along this way, and even before we get to permitting, there's going to be decisions on these alternatives that we have to make and you have to make. And that's going to be, very simplistically, let me say it like this. We can build a reservoir and it can look like this. And we can do it faster and we can do it cheaper, but you get less water. Or we can build a reservoir and it looks like this and it takes more time and it takes more money, but we get more water. So as a committee and as a team, we need to sit down and identify what are our goals for the project and what are those milestones where we're going to come to the board and say, hey, here's the decisions from a policy perspective of the BRA board that you need to give us guidance on, that you want to see us go down this path. Because the decisions that we're going to make are going to influence how the reservoir works, how it looks, how much water, how much yield, and ultimately how much mitigation, how much time for permitting. And those are all decisions that this data that we're gathering in the first two rectangles are going to support that decision-making process. So as we reach those milestones, I want to be able to come to that committee and say, hey, here's our recommendation, but here's the pros and the cons, and here's the consequences of taking a left turn or taking a right turn. So ultimately, I see that's where we're going. Now, you could say, okay, why haven't we done that already? That's a really good point. But because time is money and money is time, we have been pushing hard to get to a point in place where we're signing a contract and we can turn our crackerjack team loose on data gathering and alternative analysis, because we've got to have that before any of these conversations become germane to the decision points that we're making moving down the road. So I think that's where we are in place and time. Team, agree with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So again, that's kind of from a visionary standpoint on how this overlaps in everything that we're going to be doing. That's how I see both the committee's responsibility, ultimately the board's responsibility, and the team's responsibility for bringing those milestone decisions to you for consideration.
Ask a quick question.
Yes.
Should there be a preliminary design aspect of it? Because that's really different from final design.
That's right. And that preliminary design is, in my mind, what is submitted to the Corps. And the reason it's broken into two is because you don't want to submit something to the Corps and be so far down the road that the Corps comes back and says, no, you can't do this. But at the end of the day, that also will be a milestone that we will bring to the board. Our confidence at some point in time that this is what is going to be built, that we'd like to hedge to the left a little bit and go into final design even before we have a permit from the Corps. Understanding the risk that if the Corps says nope, or the Corps says here's the mitigation things that you're going to have to do, that it becomes really a not affordable option and we have to look at something else. But those are the decision points exactly, Director Embro, that I'm talking about. But you're correct, there is a preliminary design built into it.
Hey, David, just real quick, our base, our benchmark base were a 10,000 acres, approximately 100,000 acre feet of yield. Is that correct?
That is our benchmark, yes,
That's
sir.
okay. And so you're talking about, and I don't know what the money allocated for that being a base benchmark is. how much you're looking at there, but so in the redesign of a geographic, to make it a more acreage, to get more acreage yield is some of the things you're talking about, maybe in this process?
Go back one more slide. One more slide. Give me a map with purple X's on it.
Do you want to, I have a map on the next slide, which might be useful.
No, go back
No.
to the map where you had the crosshatch.
Oh,
Great
okay.
question. That map. So in the red is what, and this is the way I started the committee meeting off, not so eloquent the other day. Forget about the red lines. The red lines are what we've been showing for years is that's Allen's Creek Reservoir. Well, if we build it that way, there are Allen's Creek, the creek that has to be dealt with because it's waters of the U.S. That adds cost, timing, mitigation, the whole thing. If we build it any further to the north, and we have an area that we call Alligator Hole, and that is a wetland that's going to have to be delineated, blah, 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 so forth and so on. If we could design a reservoir and build it to where it doesn't impact that purple hatch, then it saves time, money, mitigation, but it may also limit the amount of water that we can get. So I may come to the board and say, I can build it that way. I can build it a lot faster. I can build it potentially cheaper, but you get less water. So we've got to figure out what's more important to our customer, a little bit longer project and more water, or something that we can do faster and less water. And I'm not sitting here telling you that those are the options, because it may be that we can build it smaller and avoid less mitigation and still get 100,000 acre foot of water.
22 years, 15 years with the current plan that you're projecting, right?
So,
She showed us 15 years.
so what we're trying to do is figure out if we can design it, do it for cheaper, and do it faster. Does that answer your question?
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad they're here.
Excuse me a moment.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'll cut my mic off.
No, I appreciate the input. And so what you see, that green blob up there, that's Alligator Hole. You see this yellow blob through the middle. That is an offset around Allen's Creek and the tributaries that mostly have water in them. So there are project drivers that are these decision-making points or these permitting triggers. And sometimes they're not, do we have to do a permit or not? It's how complex is our permit application? How much detailed site work do we have to do? What are those triggers? And so the overall schedule is driven by these points. And we will be, another part of that is developing our purpose and need. So that is, the need for the water, how much water, and what the design might look like. So I'm showing in the blue area here, that is the property with the ancillary stuff that we own carved out. So that's that area. And it kind of looks like the reservoir because we have a deed that shows that 125 contour, and that's the only reason. You see the two pump station alternatives. The good things are that while the project does have some complexities, overall, this isn't an overly complex project. The design is not overly complex. The reason that we wait until the point that we want to do the final or start final design, we have that initial design complete, but we wait to start final design is because slight changes when you're dealing with the pump station, even moving pipes and making this pipe a little bit longer, all of that's going to cost us extra money. And since we have a good known duration for that final design, we can back that up into the appropriate time into the permitting review timeframe. And then things like our environmental resources. So like we mentioned, impounding Allen's Creek might require us to impact 5 to 7 miles of essentially natural stream channel. That is going to be waters of the U.S., and that's going to require compensatory mitigation, which means replacing those miles of stream channel in another location with similar stream channel. And that is very costly. 5 to 7 miles of stream channel. That's not just going to be 5 to 7. It'll be on a ratio that the Corps will give us for If you're impacting those, you might double that, you might triple. They can really increase the cost there. Cultural resources, we identified by looking through past records, there are a couple of areas that have cultural remains that are human remains. And if we were to impact those, then that opens up a whole nother complexity on this project. So avoidance might be the best measure there. First, we have to get out there and identify if there are any more. We know the location of some. Back in the 70s, all they did was mark the center of a site and then moved on. And so we don't even know the extent of those burial sites. That would include some tribal coordination if we were to have to impact any of those. Impounding Alligator Hole, it's been identified as a important resource as a wetland. And so if we did prefer a design that impounded that would add extra complexity to our water rights permit. The pump station location, if we look at other pump station locations, that could also require real estate activity. So all of those it's a trade-off, and we will be looking at all of the options, looking for the best one, and like David mentioned, looking for direction. If we avoid everything, it might mean that we have a very small project. But if there are probably some that we are okay with triggering those kind of permits, and so we will proceed accordingly. But right now, we don't have all of the site information that's needed to bring that yet. Are there any other questions on? Yes, please.
I do have a question. So go back 2 slides for me. I'm a little bit concerned about, go one more, about the difference between these 2 slides. First, at the very beginning, I see these yellow arrows and it says determination of permitting process. And I wonder how much of that work is redundant and that we've already done before. When we went through all the litigation and everything, I thought we determined that permitting process. So why are we redoing something we've already done?
So when I put on there determining the permitting process, I'm talking about those more specific. So if we were to have to impact those human remains, then that is going to be a whole nother cultural resource mitigation plan that right now, we don't know if we're going to need to do that. And these are not small efforts. If we do not impound Allen's Creek, then we are removing a large part of the waters of the U.S. permitting with the Corps. In that case, we would just be impacting the Brazos River. And so we have that permitting trigger there. So, yes.
If we do the same thing twice, it'll be because we messed up. And we're not going to repeat anything.
And I
So
don't want us to mess up.
we haven't defined the specifics of any of the permitting that we're doing. That's what this work is doing.
Okay.
Acquiring the property from the city of Houston and going through the legislative process was just getting the project put in our name so we could run with it.
So we do know some of the permits that are going to be required no matter what. But there are options within those for, like, we know that we need to get a Corps of Engineers permit, but there are different Corps of Engineers permits. There might be an individual permit. There might be other options that we could use instead. But right now we don't have the information that's required. So if there was something in the past, there haven't been permit applications outside of the water rights permit on this project yet. So if there have been plans shown in the past, a lot of those are based off of the regulatory process. That is what is required. And then we're going to be moving strategically through those permitting processes to develop our own permitting path specific to this project.
Okay. My other question is, the way this chart reads, it shows that we're going to do permitting, and once we get our permit, we're going to keep designing, and we're not going to show those authorities our final design. And I know, just because of my history and what I do, I know that that's not really the truth, that we show them the true final design, and then we we permit, so we're permitting our final design. We're not still designing after we're permitted. And so I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that, that we know that the final design is kind of the end of permitting, so the overlap is a lot bigger.
The record of decision is kind of the end of permitting, and you're right, these do kind of overlap each other. There are elements of the design that are not necessarily regulated. What you do, maybe within, this is where I'm going to get tripped up, but what you do maybe within the pump station, some of that is going to be regulated, the flow rates, things like that. But as far as, what tank we use or what paint, those things are things that will go into the final design that may not, those don't trigger any new permitting. So there's no permitting effort continued at that point. When we are talking about final design, we're talking about a buildable project, a biddable project. So also that will include.
Those are two different words you just used. A biddable project is not necessarily a buildable project. And I feel like you just used the same word for the same thing. A buildable project is a final permitted project.
I don't understand what you're asking.
I feel like permitting and final design, what we say under final design isn't, it's the end of permitting and the start of construction, yes, but the final design is permitted. And it just looks like we're not permitting our final design.
We're not permitting our final design.
Well,
We won't finish design. We won't finish design until we have approval to build our project,
Right.
okay? And then there may be stipulations, come on up, Scott. There may be stipulations in that permit that say, here's what here are matrix that you have to avoid, here's things that you have to do. But at the time that we get the permit and it's not challengeable anymore, then we will finish design and build. So it will be a biddable project, a buildable project, whatever terminology you want to use. But the risk that we're going to take is starting some of that design, even if you want to consider it ultimately toward final design, as early as possible. Because we don't want to do what is really just shown on this arrow, and that is wait till permitting is done and then start design. The permitting process has already started. The design process, in theory, has already started. So there may be stipulations in that final design that make you do things, but once we get our permit, then we have a project that we can build. Talk to me.
Let me introduce
sorry.
Scott, because he hasn't presented here in over a year. Scott Birch is our project manager for Gannett Fleming, and he also has over 25 years experience with the Corps of Engineers before going to Gannett Fleming. So he is the best one to answer this.
So permitting also, Director Henderson, in your world means getting a sheet of paper and saying you can get mark, get set, go, right? That's not
means
what
move dirt.
that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a permit and then final design, because in your engineering world where you may have to show final design to get your permit, we do not. We have to show, I think the Corps says, somewhere to 30% design so that they can understand the impacts of what we're building. Then we can take their approval and go finish based on what the specifications that we've already told them.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Scott Birch. Excellent question. And I think there's some, as we put the slides together, there was some discussion of to have a simplified, but to show the detailed process, then you get a big spaghetti drawing and it gets very complicated. But you're exactly right. You don't get our record of decision, which is the final permit, will occur at the end of the final design. So when we show here is we'll get to the end of the alternatives analysis, and there was a question about concept design. That concept design, approximately 30%, will happen right at the end of that alternatives analysis. That will be the basis to go to the Corps for the Corps application and say, for our 404 permit, and say, here's what we're planning to do. The understanding is, or the assumption is, that we'll have to get a full individual permit, which will require third-party EIS, a full evaluation by the Corps. That'll all be done based on that conceptual design. As that process goes forward, we get a level of, through our interaction with the Corps and with the third-party EIS, a level of comfort that, hey, they're coming to the same conclusions that we came to. We're getting feedback that they are buying into what we've done. They agree with the purpose and need. They agree with the mitigation plan we've put together, whatever that final package looks like. At that point, then, the permitting, there's a trail off where the permitting is going to then wait to say, okay, show us what you're ultimately going to do before we give you the permit, but we can start that final design. And that was what Rachel was trying to say, is that point is somewhat moving. We can't wait till the very end because they won't give us the permit until we give them the final design. But if we get that warm and fuzzy feeling that everything's moving along, or if it's not a very complex pathway with some of the regulatory reform that's ongoing, we may not have to go through potentially a full individual permit depending on that. So where you start the detailed design is kind of a question, and that's where David was talking about the risk management. And then but you're absolutely right. The permitting process doesn't end until you get to that record of decision. And to get to that record of decision, you have to submit, here's the final plans and specs of exactly what it is we're going to build. They'll sign the record of decision, and then you go to construction. And then there'll be permit management or environmental management during construction that says, because part of our plan will be, we're going to do these things to monitor for endangered species, we're going to do these things for mitigation, and you have to be able to document and turn back into the Corps and other agencies, yes, in fact, we are doing all the things we said we were going to do. So permitting kind of runs through that, and I think this big green block in the middle is really designed to be, that's the Corps' consideration of the conceptual design, third-party EIS evaluation. And then once you get to that point in that evaluation where you have a high level of comfort that they're coming to the same conclusions, they're going to be okay with this plan, they're not going to say you have to go do something completely different, then we start the final design. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, what I think you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that really the permitting phase is to come to, a level of comfort's a good word to use. Really, it's a level of confidence that we're going to be able to fully permit everything.
Correct.
And get to the end. And so once we have that level of confidence, then we're going to move forward and overlap these things.
That's correct.
So then
That's correct.
we can construct as fast as we can.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct. But the thing that's not shown on this slide is the actual final permit that you gets delivered when you complete the final design phase. But where you want to start after they've gone through their EIS that they've done and shown that the impacts are the same as what we have identified. They've fully been vetted. There's no other way to do this. The plan that we've proposed to the Corps is in fact the least environmentally damaging practical alternative. And then we can start the design and go forward with that. But that permitting piece stays open all the way until you get to your record of decision and actually get that permit right before construction.
Yeah, what I've seen is a lot of times that permitting will even overlap your bid phase and your contractor selection.
And it can go into your construction phase.
It could push back your move dirt date, but
It could, correct.
It could kind of jump all the way through final design.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that block is really that time period where it's under consideration, they're looking at the purpose and need, they're doing their third-party EIS, they're kind of making that determination of, is this plan the LEDPA? So
Sure.
that they can then, and once they get to that point where we have confidence, like you said, that they're coming to the conclusion that our plan is the LEDPA, then we can start the design and start moving forward from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Scott, thank you. Let's let Rachel get through the rest of her slides.
Yes.
I think there's at least 12 left. And what I usually find is she answers questions that I come up with along the way. So let's let her go and come to questions later.
Okay, so another important element of this is our contracting strategy, because it is important to have a quality contractor on board who will complete the duration of the project, so that there's not expensive rework or lost time throughout. So our team has worked very hard to develop a contracting strategy that meets all of the needs of the project. It is based on the standard BRA contract, which is time and materials basis with maximum cost values that are guaranteed by protective caps, and those are by tasks. It helps us manage our cost exposure because we can perform the entire project using negotiated rates, today's negotiated rates. And we have a commitment from Gannett Fleming to perform the entire project. They are agreeable to sign the contract for all of these phases, all the way through construction. And then how do we task something that we still have uncertainty around? We're proposing something a little bit different for this project. It's an annual work plan that will be approved by the Board of Engineers. It has details for the work that'll be performed on an annual basis, and it has task-specific caps. And so while we have an overall maximum project cost, we also will have an opportunity annually to task out the things that are needed based off of the information that we've gathered on the project, and to control cost in that area by task annually. The board of directors, like I said, will be reviewing it with the committee each year, and then the board of directors will have the opportunity to authorize that. And then there are contractual provisions within the contract that give BRA the ability to disengage at any point. So that protects us regarding responsibility and liability, but it also ensures that if at some point there are major changes or there is some reason that we need to off-ramp the project, BRA has the ability to do that. But otherwise, the contractor is committed to complete the project with us. It also has provisions that ensure that the engineer meets the standard of care. And then another element that's a real need for the project is flexibility. And so that is built in to manage risk and uncertainty. These provisions that we have will handle the uncertainty. They're protective to BRA, and they're fair to our engineer as well. And they will preserve flexibility to take advantage of opportunities that might occur within the regulatory environment or other opportunities that we have. If we're able to avoid some of these permitting tasks, we don't have to perform them. So we're able to adjust the tasking annually. And then all of it is based off of conservative tasking. So we have included every element that would be needed today with no changes, and assuming that we do have significant amount of impacts. But like I said, the tasks can be off-ramped if we don't need to do some of those. We've broken it out into these three categories. Category 1 is the permitting. It covers all the permitting tasks. And again, these are not sequential. So we'll still be doing tasks in Category 1 as we move into the project design category, which is Category 2. And some of them overlap to the construction category as well. This is just an interconnected project, and that's how we can organize it. So Category 2 has, once we have more permitting certainty, then it takes us from detailed design to being ready to bid. And then Category 3 describes the construction and resident project representative services. Like I said, Gannett Fleming, I want to reiterate that Gannett Fleming is committed to perform services, all of these services for the entire duration of the project. BRA is not tied in. We have the opportunity to adjust tasking annually, and we can off-ramp if for some reason continuation is not viable at some point. So the protective caps are the caps by each category. I'm showing here the $84 million for the permitting, $65 million for the project design, and then because we don't know the the extent of construction at this point, we've negotiated a formula with agreed upon rates of utilization, using the same rates for the different categories from the rest of the contract. So we're billing based, or they'll be billing based on time and materials basis. And we have provided for some exclusions for tasks that we just cannot scope at this point without more information, or things that are very unlikely and may need to be an additional service. They're not a significant list. So this is kind of grouping them together. These are the 5. Significant design changes post regulatory coordination. So if for some reason we change our mind after we've submitted a permit application, then those would be an additional service. Management of any regulatory required third-party contractors. That's something that typically we would do separately. Contested case hearing or litigation support. Any support along those lines would be according to the rates that are agreed upon, but those aren't scoped at this point, unanticipated. Later phase cultural resource activities. This is the big, unknown that I mentioned earlier about managing human remains, related tribal consultation. That is just, we cannot scope that at this point. We do not know if it will occur. If it did occur, we believe it would be a large effort. So we, rather than to inflate the overall cost, we kept it more reasonable and excluded that. And then threatened and endangered species relocation or unusual regulatory consultation. Like I said, we based our schedule, we based the cost, everything on a reasonable project scope. And so those would be unusual or unanticipated at this point. So those are excluded. This is how the annual work plan will work. So it provides a structured year by year process, a roadmap kind of for this long-term project with different complexities. This is really where the work planning happens. So the benefits to an approach like this is that it keeps the BRA and the board involved and with oversight over the project, and it also retains flexibility for the project. So the work plan will be developed with the project team. It's going to, we have one now, so it includes tasks, milestones, deliverables, and the projected budget for the upcoming year. In order to get on the budget sequence, the first one is for over a year. It's for the first 17 months. And so I'll be going through the details on that today. This allows for transparency, so there's clear expectations for the scope. It's not just broad scope, but actual detailed scope of who the coordination, what agency we need to coordinate with, what the permit application looks like, what the elements of design will be, what engineering is involved, or what modeling is required for the permit application. Those are all detailed out in the annual work plan. It also allows for risk management. So we can adjust for regulatory changes. New laws roll out in the next, there definitely will be new regulations in the next 10 years that will probably impact the project. So this allows us to scope those into the project. Environmental findings that we have at the site or unexpected site conditions can all be built into the detailed scope. The committee we will present this annual work plan to the committee for review and input. Like we were talking about earlier, it gives us a chance to look at those risk factors, decide, do we want to go ahead and accelerate design even though we haven't heard back from the Corps yet? We felt good about our meeting and so we want to accelerate design. What would be the cost of rework if we're wrong? Or how far ahead does that get us on the schedule? So questions like that we have the opportunity to bring those to the committee for their input on a regular basis. And then it gives the board the opportunity to review and approve those tasks, assuming those risks and directing the project annually. And so that is one of the important parts of this is that the board the BRA isn't obligated beyond what is authorized annually either. So if we authorize that year of work, then we complete that year of work. And then if it's not going well, or if it, there is an issue, then we don't have to authorize, or y'all don't have to authorize the next annual work plan. So this initial work plan isn't really an annual work plan. It's like I mentioned, it would be for 17 months. It covers the remainder of this fiscal year 26 and then all of fiscal year 27. So that'll get us on cadence with budget planning for each fiscal year. All of the work in this initial work plan is within the Category 1 permitting category. So we have environmental and cultural investigations that will identify the regulatory constraints through the significant field effort, like I mentioned earlier, for cultural and environmental analysis of impacts. And so those will also inform our permitting efforts. Then baseline engineering to determine the major engineering drivers, pump station location, stability of the river, and the design just to a confidence level that we can determine the permitting path. All of that is included in the initial plan. It includes the alternatives analysis and a comparative evaluation that will build an evaluation matrix for all of the alternatives. And again, all of those are permitting prerequisites, prerequisite to our application. And then the water rights and operations modeling will be initiated to determine if the selected reservoir configuration will meet regulatory and long-term water supply needs. And that will help us inform our purpose and needs statement for our permitting effort. And then develop a proactive public relations and stakeholder engagement plan. So that's working with our agencies and working with the public. And we will begin carrying out that overall strategy for our communications plan. So what this initial effort allows us to do is establish the data and plans that are needed to select and advance a preferred reservoir alternative design. And then we'll move forward with permitting and design. These are the proposed fees for the initial annual work plan. Again, these are the maximum not to exceed protective cap for each of these tasks. So you see the total there is $18,811,652. So at the end of this first annual work plan, or this first initial work plan, we have all the details for our roadmap to complete the project. That is a huge milestone for the project. And it gets us all of the baseline engineering that's required to determine the major project drivers, and infrastructure decisions will be made at that point. And we'll have a clear understanding of the future detailed design work. We'll have a well-defined and defensible permitting strategy with detailed matrix of alternatives that have been evaluated. And then we'll determine the alternative that is going to be the preferred alternative, which is a term for permitting. And that will be our proposed project. And then future risks will be identified at this point and quantified. And that's really ongoing through the workshops in conjunction with BRA and the consultants. And then a strategy for engaging the public agencies and stakeholders. The Allens Creek Reservoir project has tremendous momentum at this point, and we're in a really good position because we do have this consolidated project area that is unique to the state. That's unique to the basin to be able to have that amount of area consolidated already. We appreciate the board's support and questions, and they're very effective in helping us to consider the project. And we appreciate your support in continuing to keep it moving forward. Every step that we take at this point reduces our risk and positions us for a confident permitting effort, and makes our permit more defensible as we move ahead. The next step is going to be the alternatives analysis, and that really is our opportunity to accelerate this project. We have opportunities by avoiding impacts or minimizing impacts. Again, those are the resource impacts are what will determine the duration or the schedule for the project, and also probably the cost of the project. So that is one of the elements that we are going to be looking at, and also then the need for the water and how much water we need. That is another important element for that alternatives analysis. So we are prioritizing the critical tasks to ensure the efficiency throughout this project without increasing risk. So we're not just moving ahead without information, but we're gathering the information and moving ahead at the same time. The agency coordination strategy that we have, it's also protective to the BRA, because as we align with the agencies, as we get their input early on, then we can use that to protect the schedule and protect our credibility. So we want to have that a message to all of the agencies about our project and how we're going to accomplish this. We want that to be similar across agencies. So as we start those conversations, we need to have a little bit more information at this point, but we're getting to the point where what we've gathered over the past year and what we will gather over this summer will allow us to confidently enter into those discussions with them and get our permit application prepared. And then this proposed contracting approach is one that promotes stewardship and protects flexibility for the BRA, and then responsibly advances the project in a way that we can be confident in an outcome, that we will have a reservoir there, that we will have something that can be permitted. Now, I wanted to mention, we had an excellent committee meeting a couple of weeks ago and had a lot of feedback there as well. I want to give Director Weldon an opportunity if he wanted to say anything about that before we move on to the resolution.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to applaud the effort, Rachel, you and the team. The committee did meet a couple weeks ago. I will say, before I say too much, though, I want to see if any of the committee members have anything to say, any input. Okay, I will say that there's a lot of thought that's gone into this. The discussion that took place 2 weeks ago, I think, was a lot of the line where we got bogged down here talking about what is actually happening when. A lot of the discussion happened there. And I'm going to take a deep breath when I say anytime you hear something, what I've been told scientifically is you hear 17 to 25% of it. So this is the second time I've heard it, so I'm about halfway there. That's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, because I have concerns this morning, or announced this afternoon, that this request for $18 million does not align with some of the questions that the board is asking about the integration of analysis, design, and strategy. And I guess a light just came on in my head a few minutes ago that we're about to be asked to enter into a 10-year contract. I'm just talking generically with a firm when we don't have a decision yet on what our design construction strategy will be. And that's a caution. That's a concern. We also have in this work plan a request for $7 million for field investigations when we really don't have alternatives, an alternative discussion that's taken place. And there's an argument to be made, because it came out in the questions here, that the design of this project going toward the 30 to 35% will help guide some of the alternative analysis. And the discussion that we had in the committee, just to summarize, had a lot to do with how does the board and the contractor interact to assess risk and determine paths that allow us to navigate the regulatory requirements while being good stewards to the project. And we have before us this afternoon a request to approve a path that really hasn't allowed that discussion to take place, in my opinion. And I don't know what the impact is of us delaying this decision, but that's where my gut is right now. Because this $18 million and the paragraph that's in the resolution seems to me to speak to a 3-category commitment to a contractor that I don't know the board has really contemplated that. Because I asked the question during the committee meeting, what is our design construction strategy with the alternative delivery methods that are being considered today in industry? And there was not an answer to that question. But we're about to approve a strategy that assumes a traditional design then construct strategy that may not be the best steward of our dollars. And so I don't want to speak for the committee, but I do think the questions that we were asking during the committee have been echoed here today. And I understand the work plan, but I'll tell you, when I walked away from the committee meeting, I thought that we were looking at a kind of a 1 year. We've got to get some studies done to get in front of the Houston Toad and some time constraints there. But the idea that we're gonna enter into a 3-category contract with one firm is something that's I guess something the board's going to have to agree to and decide that that's the best approach. David and I, just to be transparent, have talked as recently as last week, and he mentioned it earlier today, that there's a need for the board to have a scoping session about this, to say where are we really in our understanding and direction for this project. And I really feel today that discussion needs to take place before we launch into a 10-year commitment with the contractor. And so I'll just stop there with my comments, but I do think I'm carrying some of that from the committee. So I think that, just to summarize, from the committee's perspective, I mean, I think it's tremendous work that has gone in to get us to this point. But there's some assumptions about dates and critical path that bleed over into design and construction strategy that are discussions that may need some more contemplation on the part of the board. So I'll just stop there and see if that generates any questions or comments. Thank you.
Supplemental to that, we concluded, David, if you recall this, the delivery method will be known in 6 to 12 months is what my takeaway last time was. Was that right? Like it's not uncommon to not know that now, we will know that soon, and this is part of the investigation to determine that.
That was what I said, yes.
And just to clarify, and that's a very good question, that this path that's before us today assumes that that's already decided, because it has money tied to categories, and it has a sequence that really doesn't, and I don't know what's behind that first paragraph that's in our resolution today. Because are we signing a contract that commits us to Gannett Fleming designing and constructing this project? And if that's the case, then that doesn't coincide with the statement of we've got 12 to 18 months to decide what our delivery method is. Or maybe I'm wrong, that we're just deciding we're going to sort out what our delivery method is with Gannett Fleming. But that's not the way it works in my world, or my understanding of the design, construction, delivery decision process, because we're presuming some things that haven't been decided yet.
May I add to that? Director Weldon, I could not agree with you more. I think where I had a little pause was the screen where it had the three categories and the amount, although it is a task base, but we don't know the delivery model. Not sure how we came up with the initial not to exceed numbers, but I also had pause based on the information that was shared.
I guess I'm not, what would y'all want to see today? What would you have preferred to see exactly? Kenny?
Well, I think my, my recommendation would be one to keep the, you know, I look at the tasks that are listed on page 31. The reservoir configuration alternatives and analysis piece of that is a critical path item. But the idea that we have a strategy that assumes, it's like the slides are saying that we're going to bring these and have overlap in process, but that doesn't play out when you look at the work plan and the way it's being executed. And so I think there needs to be a relook at how these tasks and subtasks relate to, for example, simultaneous money toward a 35% design that's not even listed in this work plan. And they're saying, I mean, what I heard earlier was that when our permanent application is finished, we'll have a 30 to 35% design. Well, I don't see any money in here for design, for example. So are we truly integrating these steps, or are we paying for them the way the colors had them laid out? It's not clear to me right now that that's not the case. That all our $18 million are being spent, and then we get 18 million spent, and then we're going to move into this next phase of design. I don't see, I mean, I realize there's data here that'll go to design, but that's not the same as having a 35% design complete that takes our preferred alternative and actually begins to gel this together into a confidence level in cost and in selection of alternatives that really start to bring the whole project into focus. Because my worst case scenario, look at this, is we're going to end up at the end of $18 million and not have a decision yet on what our design strategy is.
Kenny, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would it feel better if we reduced it to only the task one items and then we get through task one and come back and talk about the rest? Is that, David, is that even something that we could do?
We can do whatever the board's pleasure is.
One thing about that, though, is if you start piecemealing it out like that, then you're going to impact schedule.
Go to the mic.
Yeah, I hear you. You said piecemealing this out could impact the schedule somewhat, but I feel like task one, I hear what you're saying, Kenny. Task one is huge, and it's really going to get us through what alternatives there are, if there are any. And so maybe reducing down to just that and then come back with the other 10 million later once we've figured that out. But what I think you're saying is that maybe we don't have enough, or maybe we have too much, like maybe in task 3 where the bulk of it is, and we could further refine that by finishing task 1. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. I mean, a simple way of looking at it is we're assuming here that we're going to spend $7 million to do field investigations, and we don't know yet, based on our alternative analysis, whether any or all of those are required. I mean, what if the board decides our risk tolerance is extremely low and we don't want to touch any of those areas? So there's no need for a cultural. I'm not saying that
But we
would
need a
never be
staff
need.
recommendation to do that, and I think that's what this plan is setting out, that data gathering. And I don't see how you can do task 1, Director Henderson, without 2.8, without floodplain assessment. How can you, I mean, I'm not the consulting engineer expert, but seems like that's necessary. I feel like some of the issue here is this seems to come across as a rigid plan, and it's probably not. How many thousands of pages of information are you looking at to reduce it down to one slide? Rachel, do you know?
Yes, I
Put that
could,
into context of what you're looking at to come to this, and I think you've kind of said it. But
we're
maybe
close
that
to
would-
100. I mean, it's close to 100 pages to detail this out. And I don't know that it's necessarily useful to go through every minute detail, but for instance, baseline engineering is included in task 2. So that is your baseline to begin to develop the design to a point where you can do your evaluations on things like the federal water operations analysis, state water right analysis. So this is so interconnected between the early element of conceptual design and the permitting element that it falls into task 1, but there's, like you've mentioned, there's a certain degree of engineering that's required in order to do the permitting. And that is built into this. It just falls under the permitting category. So the categories are just an organization method so that we could develop the entire project scope. But these are very interconnected. The environmental task 3 field investigations, environmental and cultural resource investigations are a huge driver for the design. They're a huge driver. So that was all of the work that I mentioned earlier that we did over the last year to scope those and how broad those needed to be. That is all built in the detailed design or the detailed analysis now in the field. That is what task 3 is. That is the point that unlocks our permitting strategy, that reveals what we need to do for permitting. If we get out there, I showed you great big swaths. Those were high probability areas. Those are not surveys that have been completed. So if you remember on that map, and I could scroll way back or maybe get help, but on the western side, that was based off of a 1970s evaluation. But then all of that went over Allen's Creek and went up the Brazos River, those are areas that have not been surveyed at all. So there may be no sites there. There may be no remains there. The remains may be the way that the landscape is out there. You have on the western side, you have almost a cliff or a bluff from where the Brazos used to be. Those sites all of those human remains and stuff, they may be up on the top of that bluff. And so the area that has been flooded year upon year upon year, they may not have any sites. But without doing those surveys, we don't know. We don't know what our constraints are for the design. So we do these in conjunction with that conceptual design in order to answer those questions and in order to determine the permitting path. Without them, we could proceed with designing some configuration alternatives, but they would be no more than blobs on the map. They would be exactly what we already have, which are an inundation area. If we dammed it here, then we know where the water would go back. We can do that off of a topographic map right now, but that doesn't mean that we know what the next step is. So these determine what the following steps are to get the project off the ground. I think I saw, yes, ma'am.
You can go and finish.
Okay, thank you. And also task 5, it doesn't look like a major task, but developing that aquatic resource delineation report, again, that's that biological study. So the drivers that are environmental, cultural, biological, those are in task 3 and task 5. And then it's missing a task 4. That is the next phase of the geotechnical survey. That happens based off of the information gathered from this first year. So it's not avoiding the design task or delaying the design task. This is getting the information that we need on a site that has been majorly unstudied. It's getting the information that's needed in order to develop the constraints for the design. And there are decision-making points, and maybe we emphasize that more today about the decision-making points because that was a question of the committee. There are a lot of points along that process where we can say, okay, we found significant cultural resources, or we found a significant important protected species, and so we want to avoid that. and that feeds back into the design. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do more to the design other than push a line at this point. So there's only a certain amount of design needed in order to develop that environmental impact, strategy, or that environmental impact analysis. And then that determines what the permitting strategy is.
And you say 17 months instead of, you're saying initial.
That's
annual.
initial.
I
Yeah,
know that-
17 months. Okay, and so the strategy behind the annual work plan is to give that opportunity to have the feedback from the board. And it also is, so the overall strategy of permitting 3 category, the big 10-year project, and it doesn't have an end date in the contract, but this overall strategy of having this major contract is so that we have we aren't continually renegotiating with the contractor for terms and for rates. We don't wait until it allows us to overlap those categories. It allows us to overlap the tasking between permitting and construction and design, and overlap those as is most efficient for the project. So having an annual work plan gives us the oversight, and the board the oversight that we need to effectively execute the project, and not just give us huge buckets. We're not asking for, just here's our general plan and please approve it, and then we walk away and we don't see you in 10 years. No, we have this annual work plan so that there is detailed tasking that we can review and discuss like we're doing today.
So the plan, here's why I said, the plan is for this to get you to the fall of 27, essentially, to a big board meeting where big things happen.
Yes.
And in the meantime, we're going to have the Allens Creek Committee meeting also. And how often do you envision that happening, and what kind of input do you expect to receive from the committee along the way? In your ideal world?
So my vision was, and it's the phone call that, the conversation that Director Weldon referenced a minute ago, was to have a workshop sometime in the next few months where we talk about some of the questions that came out of the committee meeting, some of the goals of the project, some of the goals of the committee, and understanding what the risk discussions were going to be. That would be the first meeting. Then our goal, our concept for interaction with the committee would be to meet twice a year, where we came to you at some midpoint and reported on progress and showed you what our draft work plan was going to be for the upcoming year, and then meet again in the summer to, again, update progress, show you the spend, and then talk about the budget for the year to come. So that was, I see the committee meeting maybe 3 times a year. But that's vision, and that's vision. And let me be real clear too. These committees are something that are, these acting committees like the Property Committee and the Allens Creek Committee are newer committees that we're trying to figure out the path forward and how to best use the expertise of the board and the staff and make progress. So that was the purpose of us asking the chairman if we could have an Allens Creek Committee or we could have a Property Committee meeting, was to dig into your expertise and to be able to move projects forward like that.
And so at that point, for example, it may come up that the toad in the purple circle up at the top, right? Looks like to me that's probably not going to end up being an issue based on where it was outside the
one would hope.
I don't know. We got to go make sure. At some committee meeting, you may have determined by that point, right, Rachel, that it's not an issue and therefore it's off the table, or you might have determined, hey, maybe it is an issue, and if we do this, then here are our alternatives that we're coming up with. Give us guidance on how you want to go. That's what you would ask the committee to do, right?
But respectfully also, it would never be our intent, unless we're directed to bring the board or the committee 100 pages of work plan to have you to go through all of that.
I'm not looking for that. I'm
all
hearing,
of that detail.
The concern I'm hearing from Director Weldon is something that I'm trying to pull out of y'all to make sure, because I think, we share similar concerns, but I think I feel better about where this is, I think, than he does right now. And so I'm trying to make sure that we hear all the things that would lead him to vote yes on this later today. Does that make sense? Director Ruiz?
Yes, my understanding, Rachel, is what you're trying to do is identify any potential roadblocks, eliminate any potential roadblocks before you start building something and they go, oh, we found this, now we have to stop, and then we have to go back and get re-permitting. Now it's costing us more money. You're trying to save us money. I understand what you're doing, especially 3.2. Yeah, that's a big one. You start digging here and all of a sudden, oops, now we got to stop. And that may take who knows how long to get around it. So I understand what you're doing.
Go ahead.
Turn your mic on. Turn your mics on before you talk, please.
So just so I can understand, because I, of course, with Director Weldon, but I want to understand, so it's not like there's not any engineering design going on during task 1, 2, 3, and 5. You're taking all the information that you're coming up with here to tweak your designs, because you can't come up to a final design without knowing all of this information. So just because you don't have engineering design up here doesn't mean it's not going on. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So as we mentioned before, that final design or the design section, that is a lot more detailed design. That's things that aren't even required by the Corps of Engineers for our permit, like a detailed cost analysis. What does this actually cost to construct? That's built into that second category. More detailed design. Right now, we will be looking at more of a cost-benefit analysis of impacting resources against the volume of water, and then some of the general cost of operation and construction. But we don't need to have detailed design and then move it over. It might adjust, like even a change in elevation will adjust some of that detailed design, and that's not money well spent, because we would have to readjust the length of a pipe, and all of that those are things that the engineer will charge us for. So it's better to use a conceptual design or up to a certain element of design. And I'm not an engineer either, so they'll step in and correct what that word. But conceptual design at this point is beyond just a footprint. We do need to know things like, okay, we're going to have a pump station. It's this size and it's going to pump this far. If we used a different pump station location, that looks completely different. So those things we do have to evaluate. But right now, the specifics of design, those are not permitting prerequisites, and we are focused on, if you remember from the slide with the long timeline, we need to focus our efficiency efforts, anything that we can do to make this more efficient, on that permitting section. All of this, it falls under permitting, but we do have to submit a design with our permit. So that is a prerequisite. It's just not the final design category, the big design category.
Okay, so my second and final part to what my thought process was. So after all of this, and I know you can't give me an exact, but what percentage of the design do you think would probably be completed after all of this?
That's an excellent question. So for the reservoir, then we're at least at 30%, but there will be some elements that we've looked at closer that might be 50, 60% designed. And that's just because we have to have enough design to weigh those considerations. So if it's something like, I mentioned earlier the bluff. So if the bluff, there are, human remains on the bluff, but they're not down into our property. So our property line falls right along the middle of the bluff. So say that those are really on the top of the bluff. We have to still protect those sites against like seepage. So we might design that protective measure along the bluff. That may be nearly fully designed. It might be, okay, we're stabilizing this, we're encasing it with concrete, we're completely protecting it. And really the reason that we've accelerated or we've completed that design that far is so that we can prove that we are mitigating effects to those sites. So some things like that will have more design. And then other things, we don't need to know what's inside the building for the pump station other than some prescriptive things. We don't need to know exactly what it looks like for permitting. We will need to for construction. So that can float. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we were addressing your question because Rachel was talking, I think, in a bigger scale than what were you saying just at the end of this work plan?
Trying to make,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
just,
Okay.
just at the end of this work.
Just
plan.
at the end of this. Scott, 10%-ish?
About 10% at the end of this work plan, and then at the end of the second
Yeah, come to the
year.
mic.
I'm sorry. At the end of this work plan, in the alternatives analysis, you'll have about a 5 to 10% design. The work plan that would follow this the next year would take that, whatever that select, and you would have 5 to 10% of a variety of different alternatives. You would take the one that gets selected and then flesh that out to about a 25 to 30%. That's what gets submitted to the Corps, and that's what would allow you then to go and go through the permitting process. And then once you got to that reasonably assured piece of the confidence that Director Henderson was speaking about from the Corps, you would then take it from that 30% to the final design, which is ready to go to construction.
Director
you.
Parks has a
Thank you.
question. Who for?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question so much as a comment. I see we have two very different issues, and one is the actual complexity of the issue where we're still asking questions and trying to ascertain, where we sit in the actual project. But the real issue is ultimately this board holds the responsibility for whatever this vote is. And we have the chair of the committee who is telling us that we need more time, more questions need to be brought up, and the committee has not arrived at a point to be on board with what it is that's being presented today, at least the advice of the chair. And so the question is sort of 800-pound gorilla in the room is we show up to all these meetings and we all vote yes to whatever costs have been put in front of us, and the staff are the ones making the recommendations, and we take staff recommendations. And what's being proposed for the first time that I've sat on this board is someone actually saying, let's take a step back and look at some of these things because they don't align with the board actually directing the staff where to go. And so based on Director Weldon's comments, I can't get to a yes on any resolution that's put forward. I think it would be absolutely negligent for me to do that. I think more work should have been done ahead of time to have these questions between the committees, the staff. I appreciate all the work that you've done. I have no doubt from all the work we've done together in the past that you are the experts in these fields. But this line of communication is what I would consider a failure going into today. So my vote will be no on whatever moves forward in support of whatever Director Weldon recommends.
So I echo some of those feelings. I will say, I want to back up a bit, okay? Rachel, I think this presentation was fabulous. The amount of work and effort and time and the details, no doubt, very professional, very well executed. I too am disappointed that we don't have alignment from the committee to the recommendation today. But let's all not lose focus here. This whole entire board, this will be the biggest project done through BRA, for sure, on our tenure on this board. And we've all had alignment to litigate, to purchase, to go up with the city of Houston and everything that we did to get to this point. And we should be very proud of that. The work that you've done to get us now to the next step, you should be very proud of that work as well. What I think I would like to just see and say today is there's still some more work to get us all back aligned. And really, I think it's more of an education, I don't think that we have a misalignment, and I know that we've both used that word, but I think it's more that this is a lot of information, and the way I see this, 15, 20-year project that we agreed upon, this is where we have to get it right, is this first part. And if this takes us another month, that you have committee meetings, or we all come back up here in a month and vote when we have everyone here, that feels better to me. That's all. But that is no, I don't want any misconception from my perspective that this board is very much in favor of this project, and we just want to get it right, is how I feel in what's being said today. So, maybe we can take some of these questions and meet as a committee. And I will say that I met with Director Weldon before this meeting saying I should have stayed 2 weeks ago after my committee meeting, and we all should, I'm challenging us as a board, let's, even if you're not on the committee, come to this committee meeting, and we all need to be actively engaged, because it's, again, the most important thing that we're going to be able to accomplish through the BRA in a long time. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Rachel, how did you settle on like a 17-month? Was that just a natural break are you trying to get on a schedule?
I'm just trying to get on the budgetary schedule so that we can use these real numbers to align with the budgetary process and the requirements that we will have when we seek Texas Water Development Board inputs on that. So yes, that's what it completes this fiscal year, and then it's just a full 12 months.
Potentially, there could be a proposal for a shorter time period for the first check-in, do that in in 5 months or 6 months, or we have committee meeting. I'm not advocating for anything right now. I'm
Yeah, absolutely. The committee
around.
meeting schedule isn't driven by this, so we absolutely could check in after. Really, it would fit the work that's happening in the fall, like during the fall, because we will have done a good amount of these field investigations at that point and have a lot of the answers to these questions and have a refined plan. We will really have a refined plan at the end of this, and so that's what we're aiming for, is that refined plan for how we move ahead through the agency coordination and regulatory requirements.
Director Huber.
Well, it seems like is some urgency here that we need to consider in moving us toward the permitting of this project. And this has all got to be done first. And I hesitate to delay any longer on this kind of thing.
I would respectfully request that we just pull this agenda item, let us sit down with the committee and put some more work and effort into answering some questions, and then get back together in June at the board meeting and bring this to you again. That'd be my recommendation.
David, excuse me, if you push this off, I'm asking because I don't know, can you call a special board meeting?
Yes, we could work with the leadership of the board to consider a special called board meeting, but we're talking about a project that's going to be completed in 10 to 15 years, and a month here and a month there is not going to be an issue. That's right. We have time.
Kenny, can you sum up for Rachel and David what they should do going forward?
Let me, because I'm confused. I don't know if I heard something different than some of y'all. I am not, in my mind, I don't understand exactly what y'all are looking for that we have not already heard. So if you would help me in my ignorance, because I'm very cognizant about our fiducial duty too, because I've been on other boards and I know what that pertains. But there's something that I'm missing somewhere, so please enlighten me exactly what y'all are looking for and that you want for them to tell us that they haven't already told us.
Right, so are you asking?
I'm asking you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So,
Putting it back on the chair of the committee.
right, so I want to echo a couple of things that have been said here, because Rachel, I've got full confidence in what you've done and what the staff has done to get us to this point, and I don't disagree with anything that was said, and I really applaud the effort to get the details of analysis so comprehensively organized early on so that we understand what will impact alternative selection. So the strategy here to define constraints for analysis, alternative analysis, is an excellent product. And it should most likely be launched in that method, okay? The bigger issue here, though, is the integration of permitting, design, and construction, and the path you take to do that is related to the time that will be spent and the money that will be spent in the outcome. And I don't think we've got alignment of, maybe it's just understanding, but it may not be alignment in the actual strategy of how to achieve that. So the simple way of looking at it is, and I'll just use an analogy here, we've got a really good set of plays to run here, but to me, conceptually, there's still a debate about whether we're going to run to set up the pass or we're going to pass to run. And that's something that will ultimately chart the course that we take. Now, the reason I've brought up this decision about the design and construction method is because that arguably is one of the most cost impactful decisions that we will make. But there are words that are being said by our contractor that lead me to believe that that's already been assumed to some degree. Now, that may just be a communication issue at this point, but it's still a question. And I hear words like we're going to have a 20 to 25% design when we're ready to permit. I would argue, and we haven't had the discussion yet for me to actually present this argument, that we should have at least a 35% design with some confidence about what we're going to ask the Corps to do. We shouldn't still be in the 20% design realm or 25% design realm. And I'll tell you right now, just leaning back on some experience on the federal side, you cannot take a project to get funding by Congress without a 35% design. Because what that does is it takes you to some sense of what your cost and your scope is going to be. And those are some discussions I think we need to have with the board being comfortable with, and I know a lot of work has gone into the contracting strategy, but there needs to be consensus and agreement on that strategy, because what I see today that's not written is us signing up to a $150 million contract with Gannett Fleming that's a time and materials contract. And we haven't even had that discussion. You know, that's a path. I think the board at least should have through the committee and with the board, a discussion about what is the path we're going to take, because it ultimately determines some of those long-term decisions and outcomes. And you know, David and I have talked about setting some dates about when things can be done or when they should be done. And I mentioned during the committee meeting, and I'm sure you remember us talking about the word risk. Well, that's a word that's a relative term. Some of the risk is tied to regulatory oversight, and paths that we choose will either increase or decrease that risk. And site selection will increase or decrease risk. And so there's some of those things, back again to the scoping discussion that David and I have had a discussion about, would maybe be beneficial for the board to just say, where are we going to be, a run-oriented or pass-oriented offense? Let's reach agreement on that. And that's just a kind of a strategic way of looking at it going in. And in that process, what it's going to do for the board, it's just going to help our communication of this issue. It's going to help us understand the nuances of what a time and materials contract of this scale really means to us. And is that it really in our best interest as a board? I think we should have that discussion. And so that's hopefully that helps answer your question. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with any of the technical content here. I'm in 100% agreement with that. But what I'm cautioning us on is the overall strategy to procure a reservoir. And I think the board needs to step back and look at that, because there's some decisions that the board should make about the risk that we're willing to accept, or we want to be really conservative in an area, or we want to be more aggressive in another area. And I think that that'll help us all as we move forward.
Director Huber?
I was just curious, any of the other members of the Allen's Creek Committee I haven't heard from except Jen, have any ideas on this or opinions on it, since they've been at all the meetings?
I'll tell you, there was a scheduling issue, and I was not at the last meeting for Allen's Creek, so I can't really speak to much of that. But, you know, just a comment, I 100% agree with what Kat said. We've got to get this right. And I like the idea of tabling this one and letting Kenny's committee and all of us get back together and let's align on the support, you know, and then bring it back to the next board meeting. June is really, it's not that far away. So taking an extra look at this, I think, is probably a good thing for everybody, and getting it out in the committee, flushing out all the questions, I think would be more helpful than discussing it here for hours on end and asking the same questions over and over. I think it's better in the committee.
I think we're already to the point of tabling it, right? Or do we need a?
That's where I am. Yes, sir. Without a doubt.
Okay. So, but I want to make sure that the committee meeting is fully productive and that it's understood what needs to be happening at that meeting in order for us to move forward ASAP on the next one. So,
yeah,
whatever. Right. So, I'm sorry?
She said there's probably
more than one. I think we've all just signed ourselves up for a lot more on the committee and observing.
Does staff understand what's desired for that is what I'm getting at?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Then
No, we don't need a motion. We're not taking any action.
we're just not taking any action. We have a choice at this point. It's 1:10. Do we want to take a short lunch? Okay, let's do it. Let's plan for a 30-minute. Come back at 1:40. Good? Huh? No, I don't. Okay, let's go, go back to agenda item number 2. report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2026 first quarter investment report by Michelle Gerwa, Chief Financial Officer.
Members of the board, this is in your packet. If you have any questions, Michelle is here to answer those questions.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody? Seeing none. Agenda item number 3, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2026 first quarter financial report by Michelle Gerwa, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Chairman, the report is in your packet. If any of our board members have a question, Michelle is here to answer those.
Anybody have questions? Seeing none. Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on annual review and adoption of the Brazos River Authority investment policy by Michelle Gerwa, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. At least once a year, we are required by the Public Funds Investment Act and the Texas Government Code to bring our investment policy to the board for review and approval. In conjunction with our investment advisor, Valley View, and BRA staff, we have come up with a few changes that need to be made to the investment policy. The first, we're updating the date that it's being revised or adopted. The next, we're adding NCUSIF, which is the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund, to the letter of credit collateral calculation. We are adding third party as a safekeeping institution. And on Appendix B, we have updated the name of Duncan Williams Securities to South State Securities to reflect their name change. If there are no questions, there's a resolution. Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that it has reviewed and hereby adopts the Brazos River Authority investment policy, including the investment strategy statement, approved broker-dealer list, and approved training sources as presented to the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority on March 30th, 2026.
You've heard a reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion by
Crone.
Whatever name you want.
Judy Crone.
Well, they both did.
Oh, okay.
By Director Crone, seconded by Director Taylor. Sorry. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilden,
Yes.
Director Boren, Director Giese,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Imbro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon.
Yeah.
Agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on ratification of the 2026 rates for the replacement water supply agreements, 2-tier contracts by Michelle Gerwa, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. This is once a year, we adjust the rates on our 2-tier contracts. These are contracts that came out of the 1991 rate case. They're called 2 tiers because they have 2 different rate structures, one for activated or election water and a separate rate for non-activated or option water. The formula for calculating these rates is included in the contract. We presented these rates at our annual water customer meetings in June and the board meeting in July, what we thought they would be. The annual rate increase is calculated using the change in the consumer price index for the month of November. The new 2-tier rates are calculated when the November CPI is published in late December. We mailed out letters to our customers letting them know that due to the inclement weather with the January board meeting that they would be getting those billings directly after this meeting. The proposed new rates require board ratification. The rate increase for 2026 for activated water is going from $30.76 to $31.19 per acre foot. And for non-activated or option water, the rate is going from $15.38 to $15.59. Are there any questions?
Read your resolution.
I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby ratifies the 2026 rates of $31.19 per acre foot for election use water and $15.59 per acre foot for option use water, as adjusted in accordance with the formula stated in the existing replacement water supply agreements.
You heard a reading of the resolution. Motion to adopt by Director Henderson, seconded by Director Ruiz. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yep.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Agenda item number 6 is discussion and possible action on North Central Texas Council of Governments Tech Share Purchasing Interlocal Agreement by Michelle Gerwat, Chief Financial Officer.
The North Central Texas Council of Governments operates the Tech Share Cooperative Purchasing Program. It's a purchasing cooperative that represents about 200 vendors, and they're utilized by over 300 governmental entities in Texas. This is pre-negotiated pricing for goods and services that the BRA currently utilizes and are available through the co-op. All of these were submitted via competitive bid, and so they have been awarded these contracts. There is no cost to the BRA for joining this purchasing co-op. If there are no questions, I'll read the resolution.
Director Taylor has a question.
Michelle, is this for buying tables and chairs and pencils and erasers, or is it for buying construction services?
Not construction services, maybe some repair and maintenance services. I think one reason that we were interested in this cooperative is they do like some sandblasting and recoating of tanks, which is something that we're going to need on.
Some of those have expanded, and you basically can build buildings through them. And I personally don't approve of that, but what they're doing is circumventing having to take competitive bids.
Yes.
That's fine.
I can't imagine us ever building a bid without going out for
Just a
our
question.
own building a building, sorry. Anyway.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to execute an interlocal agreement with the North Central Texas Council of Governments to participate in their Tech Share Cooperative Purchasing Program.
You heard a reading of the resolution. Motion by Director Henderson, seconded by Dr. Crone. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yep.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Agenda item number 7 is discussion and possible action on surplus personal property by Michelle Gerwat, Chief Financial Officer.
All right. This is kind of our standard, bringing you the list of things that have outlasted their useful life, but may still have some value to someone else that we'd like to take to auction. The list is included in your information. If you had any questions about any particular item, I'd be happy to answer. If not, I'll go ahead and read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to dispose of the following surplus property under the terms and conditions that are in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors authorizes the General Manager, CEO, in certain instances to continue to use and or maintain previously authorized surplus property in a manner that is in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority until appropriate replacement property is received and placed in service. Items no longer needed or repairs no longer cost efficient. Quantity 1, a 2005 Blue Wave boat ID number H506. Quantity 1, John Deere Gator ID 3487. Quantity 1, Craftsman electric bandsaw. Quantity 1, Grizzly drill press. Quantity 1, Lodge rear vehicle partition. Quantity 1, Moorbark wood chipper ID number 3240. Quantity 1, Moorbark wood chipper ID number 2878. Quantity 1, Sontec flow tracker. Quantity 1, Dell server rack. Quantity 1, Ferris mower ID number 60652. Quantity 1, Ferris mower ID 2224. Lot 1, Satina dual gun lock. Quantity 2. Lot 2, file cabinets. Quantity 3. Lot 3, poly desk phones. Quantity 45. Lot 4, various items, motors, tools, equipment, scrap metals to be auctioned for scrap. Lot 5, miscellaneous office furniture, assorted file cabinets, office chairs, tables, and desks. Lot 6, miscellaneous laptops, desktop computers, and monitors.
You heard a reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion by Director Huber, seconded by Dr. Crum. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yep.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
Hi, Dave.
Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action on concrete assessment and service life extension, Castle Amendment number 3 by Mike McClendon, Chief Projects Officer.
Thank you, Director Lloyd, members of the board. To carry forward and close out the Castle project, this agenda item seeks one last amendment to the professional services agreement with Gannett Fleming Trans Systems, Inc. If this amendment is approved, and then once the funds are exhausted, the BRA will go out for an RFP and seek professional services to assist staff as needed as part of the RSMU's concrete repair program at Moore Shepherd Dam. Our goal and objective, along with the engineer's goal and objective when undertaking this project, has been for RSMU to be self-sufficient. But there's going to be items or conditions that arise that are going to likely require engineering expertise, especially whenever you're rehabilitating a structure that was built in the 1930s, which Moore Shepherd was done. So the project budget for this is $460,000. It aligns with our strategic plan to ensure the operation and maintenance of BRA water supplies in a safe and responsible manner. And we'll be looking at using this funding in FY26 and subsequent funding cycles. So just to kind of refresh your memory, going back to when we started the Castle program, in phase 1 of the evaluation, Gannett Fleming, along with BRA staff, identified areas on the structure at Moore Shepherd Dam that pose a higher risk. This FN chart, the areas in red are the areas that pose a higher risk. Those are corbels and deck slabs, and those are the areas that we've been focusing on making repairs, and the ones that we'll continue to focus upon as we move into the future. To date, we've probably made right around 24 repairs, and we have 2 ongoing at this time. Castle project culminated in the development of a long-term structural concrete testing and repair program. A critical component of that was a repair guide that was provided by Gannett Fleming for our RSMU staff. It provides a methodology for investigating and repairing areas and then prioritizing those to make the repairs. That guide also provides generalized specs and drawings that they utilize whenever they're going to make the repairs to the facility. So the guide, as I said, it provides a process for observing, evaluating, and then repairing the concrete structures. Consultation with Gannett Fleming, where engineer is recommended if staff encounters conditions that aren't addressed within that guide. And that may be inconsistent record drawings, or there could be some unusual physical characteristics that they notice whenever they're at the dam. So amendment number 3, specifically that this agenda item addresses phase 3. The original PSA not to exceed amount was $765,000. There was amendment number 1. There was a significantly deteriorated walkway that wasn't in the scope, and Gannett Fleming provided drawings, and RSMU has since made the repair. I think next slide shows an image of that repair. Amendment 2 provided some additional funding for the engineer to provide continued engineering support services. And then Amendment 3 today that we're talking about, it's really twofold. Gannett Fleming would provide record drawings or construction drawings or prepare construction drawings for RSMU and our electrical staff to take action and carry out some work on Buttress 8. There's some concrete repairs and there's some conduit that needs to be relocated. Gannett Fleming used some of the funds that were provided in amendment number 2, and this is just to push that through to final completion. And then there's some additional funding within amendment 3 to carry forward any kind of unforeseen issues that may arise. This is just an image of that amendment number 2 that I talked about for $60,000 that was out of the scope. And over here you can see the repair that RSMU made to that walkway bridge. There was structural analysis required, and we made that repair in fairly short order. I do have a resolution, really to summarize though. As I said, for amendment number 3, a portion of the funding would be for the conduit relocation project, and then the remainder would be for any additional consultation that's needed with our engineer. Again, at the end of this, if this is approved, we would go out and seek other engineering services if there's another firm that might provide services like this as we move into the future. But I do have a resolution. I can read the resolution or answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Go ahead.
All right. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to execute amendment number 3 to the professional services agreement with Gannett Fleming Transsystems, Inc. for Phase 3 of the Concrete Assessment and Service Life Extension Project, increasing the total not to exceed amount by $460,000.
You've heard a reading of the resolution. Director Wilson makes a motion to adopt, seconded by Director LaChance. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Giese,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Imbro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
Agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action on Possum Kingdom Airport rules and regulations by Randall McCartney, Regional Lakes Operations Manager, and Riley Woods, Senior Staff Counsel.
Good afternoon, Assistant Presiding Officer and members of the board. If you'll remember back in just a little history on this agenda item, if you'll remember back in July of last year, the board approved new lease rates and terms for the PK hangar leases. After that point in time, the staff developed updated lease forms with terms and conditions that were in the best interest of the BRA. Those new lease forms were provided to all of the lessees, and those have been executed to this point. The new lease includes a reference to airport rules and regulations, which must be approved by the board. That's why this agenda item is here today. Just a few of the main bullet points from within the rules and regs I believe that you all received in your packets. I can go over a few of those really quickly. Basically, The FAA compliance obviously is designed to provide safe and efficient operations at the PK Airport. Ground operations goes over operating vehicles, entering and exiting, anything like abandoned vehicles. Airport security, again, that's security guidelines for general aviation airports through TSA publications. Aircraft operation rules goes into taxiing, takeoffs, landings, loading, unloading, things of that nature. Fuel storage, personal use only at this point in time, and follow all applicable state laws and rules and regulations. And again, for the environmental issues, just making sure that folks are following the stormwater compliance. Tenants and contractors are not storing or trafficking illegal items in and off of the grounds. If there is a spill, there's process in there. It talks about who to contact and how to go about doing that. Again, a couple of the two things I really want to highlight, though. The adoption of the rules and regs will allow for the additional measures for the public safety at PK, and it is also another tool for staff to use to help manage the airport. And then also, again, by adopting these rules and regs, it will allow the board to make changes and amendments without the staff having to modify each hangar lease if changes are made. With that, I have a resolution unless you all have questions.
Director Henderson.
I have one quick question for you. Did you send this to the airport, the new rules?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they give you feedback of any kind?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything like that?
Yes, they did. We sent it out to the lessees. They commented and we addressed those, and everyone felt comfortable enough to sign the lease agreements.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Go ahead, read your resolution.
Thanks. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby approves the airport rules and regulations as presented at its March 30th, 2026 meeting.
Heard a reading of the resolution. Motion by Director LaChance, seconded by Dr. Ruiz. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
Agenda item number 11 is discussion and possible action on interlocal agreement with Texas AgriLife for boating capacity study at Possum Kingdom Lake by Brad Burnett, Chief Operations Officer.
Hello again, everybody. This is an action item that's coming from the March 16th Property Management Committee meeting. The committee is recommending that the board authorize execution of an interlocal agreement with Texas AgriLife to conduct a boating capacity store for us at Possum Kingdom Lake. So y'all probably remember we began a systematic evaluation of all our BRA-owned properties up at PK back in 2024, basically looking at all those properties to determine if our continued ownership and operation was consistent with the BRA mission. And you may remember that we developed a matrix that has a bunch of different factors that we're going through and scoring those properties, if you will, ranking them based on things like how much of the properties in the floodplain, water quality impacts, species considerations, habitat value, and things like that. We started on the upper end of the lake and have been working our way south. And back in November, you all approved a resolution for us to retain properties on the upper end of the lake that are mostly within the floodplain, and then also property around the lake that is critical for our operation and maintenance. So that was done in November. We're now moving down into more of the main body of the lake, and on some of those properties, there's a greater potential for development in the future, commercial operations, marinas, and things of that nature. And so at the October Property Management Committee last year, we began discussing the idea of conducting a boating capacity study at Possum Kingdom to look at things like crowding and safety, and to develop data and information that could help guide our future decisions on the management of that property up there. And so that was in October of last year. We as a staff, after that meeting, went and did a little bit of research and made some contacts with, make sure I'm on the right slide here, with Texas AgriLife and the Corps of Engineers and LCRA. And the LCRA and the Corps have done this type of work quite a bit. And we focused in with LCRA. They've been using Texas AgriLife for about 20 years now, have done quite a few of these studies repeatedly on some of the highland lakes, particularly Lakes Travis and LBJ. And LCRA has been very pleased with the data and information that's been generated from them. So we've got Jared Kyle here today with Texas AgriLife. He's one of the Lone Rangers that have hung in there with us all day today, so appreciate that. He actually gave a presentation to the Property Management Committee a couple of weeks ago and went through some of this in more detail than I'm going to today, but he's here if there are any further questions. And so you can see some of the study objectives there that will form the basis of a scope of work for us here. And then the primary methods of executing the work are doing a survey of all the lakeside property owners around the lake and then all boat owners within a certain geographic region in that area. And then they're also going to do 4 air flights over the reservoir, 3 on the major holiday weekend. So there'll be one on Memorial Day, one on July the 4th, and one on Labor Day, and then a 4th one on just kind of a regular day of the week, if you will. This is just some examples. I just picked a slide from Jared's presentation of some of the stuff that has come out of studies that they've done for LCRA. You can see there that they divide the lake into different sections and look at things like, favorite areas, where people congregate, where people avoid, areas that are unsafe or overcrowded. They look at where people enter and exit the lake most often. And they also categorize different types of users of the lake. When they do these flights, they're able to discern whether we're talking about bass boats or wake boats or party boats, so they kind of get a flavor for the way folks are using the reservoir. And so the Property Management Committee is recommending authorization for David to execute an interlocal agreement with Texas AgriLife to do one of these studies at PK. And again, there's 2 primary benefits that we're going to get out of it for the BRA at PK. One of those is helping us with those future property evaluations when we start looking at some of these larger properties along the lake that have greater potential for development and new marinas. This will provide data that can help inform the board's decisions on whether we retain those properties, whether we divest of them and put any restrictions in there with regard to what might or might not be done with them. So that's one thing. And then also outside of that, just in our day-to-day operations and management up there, we get requests pretty often for developers and commercial operators for permits as we sit here today, just going through our normal day-to-day business up there. And this will, I think, help inform our decision-making on some of those a little bit better as well. So that's kind of a brief nutshell. Director Huber is the chairman of the Property Management Committee, and so I'd pause here, Director Huber, and see if you have anything to add to presentation here.
That was a good presentation. I think it's important that we do understand what situation we have up there. I mean, like we have a developable parcel of land and a developer wants to put 500 homes on there and then put a 500 slip marina for all the owners. We need to know if that's even possible and safe. So I think it's going to be a good thing.
So I've got a resolution on the next slide here, but I'll be happy to answer any other questions that there might be.
Director Henderson has a question.
I don't have a ton of questions today, I'm sorry. What is the duration we're looking at for this, and then what's the deliverable we look to get out of it? Based on what you said, I'm feeling like it's a year, maybe a report, but I just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, so we'll get a report probably at the end of this year. Again, they'll do the aerial flights and be gathering the data and the mailouts, starting now. One of the reasons we wanted to get this to the board today was so we can be ready for Memorial Day coming up here in May. So they'll be gathering the data, doing those flights through the summer and into the fall, and then we will end up with a report that documents their findings. Looking at a bunch of different metrics, such as this, in terms of where the lake's crowded, what people feel. One of the things that they do is surveying the lakeside property owners, asking their impressions of questions about the lake. How do you feel like it's being managed? Do you feel like it's safe? What are unsafe areas? Where is it overcrowded? And so it's going to be a report with a lot of data like that, compartmentalized, not just for the lake as a whole, but in specific parts of the lake, because we may have areas of the lake where we potentially have some issues that we want to address. But if a developer wanted to develop over here instead of here, it might be a different story. So we'll have data that will help us address those questions.
Will they present that to the board at a future meeting, or is it just the report?
I'm certain we could get Jared to come present it.
If you would like a report to the board, we'll do that.
I really would.
Absolutely.
I think it would be really important to know what comes out of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll inform decisions in the future.
Yeah, I did mention the cost. This is within David's discretionary amount that he can authorize. So the reason we're getting the authorization is because the board has to authorize interlocal agreements. The cost of this is going to be about $125,000. We've got money in the budget, and were it not for the interlocal agreement, it would be something that David could execute without the board's authority. So that's why we're here today, is the interlocal agreement.
All right, read your resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager/CEO to execute an interlocal agreement with Texas AgriLife Research, an agency of the state of Texas and member of the Texas A&M University system, under which Texas AgriLife Research will conduct a boating capacity study for Possum Kingdom Lake.
You heard a reading of the resolution. There was a motion by Director Huber, seconded by Director Taylor. Please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance, Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yep.
Director Walden.
Yes.
Agenda item number 13 is discussion and possible action on retirement committee membership by David Collinsworth, GM CEO.
So the old retirement members have to be, they're appointed by the board chair and they have to be ratified by the Senate here. So the board has to adopt who Cynthia put on, who our board chair put on the retirement committee. So that's what this is. Judy Crone, Jen Henderson, Christine Geesey, Austin Ruiz, and Ford Taylor.
Any discussion, any questions? Read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the retirement committee shall be comprised of no more than 9 members and no less than 5 members selected from the board of directors, and be it further resolved that the board of directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby ratifies presiding officer Flores' appointment of the following individuals to serve as members of the retirement committee: Judy Crone, chair; Jen Henderson, vice chair; Christine Geesey, Austin Ruiz, and Ford Taylor. Appointed members of the retirement committee shall serve on the committee until a successor is appointed.
Motion was made by Director Wilson and second by myself, Director Lloyd. So please poll the board.
Assistant Presiding Officer Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
No.
Director Weldon.
Yes.
Let the record show he should be here early to set up for the meetings.
Okay, now we're gonna conduct a closed meeting.
Mr. Chair, we're going to ask to move this agenda item into a further board meeting when we have some other things in place and time is more friendly to us.
Agenda item number 14 is withdrawn.
Stay here as long as you want. We won't close till 7 tonight.
Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? All of you do. Motion to adjourn by Director Weldon and seconded by Director Huber. All in favor? No further business. We'll adjourn the meeting at 2:15 p.m.